Greetings, market rebels, and welcome to this week's macro measure video combined with the ever trusty, ever reliable sector situation. It's Friday, May 23rd, 2025. I think it's about almost 20 to 5 here, and we are about to get rolling here on this Memorial Day weekend video. Here is our trusty Market Rebellion disclaimer. Here is our trusty Market Rebellion intellectual property rights notice. And here is our slide from last week. I think we were getting closer to it doesn't get much better or melt up type of scenario. Anyway, like I said, it is about 20 to 5 here East Coast time. And we're going to go through it, but I've got some highlights built into here. Look, this is just a reminder I put in there, but that's really kind of forgotten about, and then it happens. And that's what we got this week, right? Where everything was going just wonderful and really according to our scenario. And then we came into the week, which I'll talk about, and then we ended up with that old hesitation there. And then we just got the bond auction, and then we went boom, in terms of the Trump tariff stuff once again. So anyway, let's see if there's anything else I really want to bring up here. But that's why I always try to slide those reminders in. Just don't get lulled into that comfort zone because even in front of holidays, things can happen and often do. I think that's really it but that I really wanted to just note. The rest of it kind of speaks for itself. This week, we're just going right into real-time charting. There's nothing else I can do. I'm just so busy. I'll show you some other things, and we'll wish everyone a great Memorial Day weekend, a safe one, and we'll thank everyone that we're honoring this weekend for their sacrifices. And anyway, so I don't really have a theme. I think if there was a theme, I would go to this right here for this week's slide. It became concerning and sort of surprised me because I was busy. The UOA was kind of lackluster for a while, and the market was lackluster for the first 3 days. As I said, we were kind of saying that was probably our news neutral, most likely scenario that probably you cool off by chilling out, pulling back, going sideways, whatever. And then you probably try to rally because the trend has been up and they've really been holding on to gains well. And that didn't really happen. It did happen, but then it got undid, I think. So I think it was maybe, not necessarily, but maybe on its way to playing out to that extent. But then we ended up with the auction, as I noted, and we ended up with the Trump tariff information that became another kind of like reason to sell. So there you go. I do want to note that the last week we went with this line, hollow news skirt, and I explained that last week. Future surge of FOMO, underinvested, chasing pain trade. Most is goose with air pockets. And I'm asking this week, could that matter? And so we'll look at that because that's the one sort of problem with when they really take things up so violently without breaks and just so vertically is that they often leave these air pockets. And that's can be a sort of a technical problem, I think, that they have to address. And maybe that could happen. We'll see. Anyway, the hopium rose colored glass views were really winning out. Has it ran its course? I'm saying I don't know yet. I don't know if it has. It could still reemerge, and I think we're really in a situation where we're in a state of flux. So that's my most likely scenario. Where are we now? In other words, I'm concerned. I think we're in a state of flux, and when we're in this, you can easily transform, I think, from being bullish and to bearish and back again and several times over. And I think we'll see that on the chart. So just from where I think they may have ended up, but that could make for tough trading at times. So just know that coming in. I do think that the intermediate and longer term trends still look quite good, but the short term became concerning. And we'll look at that. We'll talk about that breadth in sectors went from doesn't get much better to risk off this week. And there's just no denying that. I'm not saying it's the end of the world, the end of the rally, anything like that. I'm just saying that if you look at it objectively, this was definitely a week where things cooled off, and they cooled off in a meaningful way, not just, hey, that was a brief little blip. Now, it could amount to nothing in the grand scheme of things. I won't argue that that can't happen. I'm just saying, as we know it right now, it's a little concerning, and I think the XAU being one of the only sectors that really did well, it sort of tells you that you went risk off, and now there's more of that sort of defensive positioning happening again, whereas XAU really was, for the most part, I would say consolidating or at least pulling back somewhat over the past month or so, roughly speaking. We talked about gap extravaganza, just how they just use futures to blow right through what we think would have been really key resistance on the way back up. But now we're back above. And as we said last week, are we actually getting the tests from above? And we'll check that out. Let's see. And again, I would just say last week I said that the prior 2 weeks proved how quickly and swiftly and how strongly things can shift. And now I would say that the last 2 days, excuse me, prove that again, where the week was actually, you were close to unchanged in the SPY and the Qs. Really on Wednesday afternoon, it really hadn't been a week where not much had happened, and suddenly, right, with the bond auction, and then the Trump news and all that stuff, things just kind of got rocked. Anyway, the big thing next week, can't fail to mention, right, that I've mentioned this several weeks ago, that often they don't like to see, I think they don't like to let the market really go without getting the NVDA EPS release uh, on the tape, right? And so is that going to be the monkey hammer wild card, the pain trade amplifier, or a nothing burger? So is it going to be where everyone thinks everything's wonderful again and they get the shock of their lives, where NVIDIA doesn't deliver or doesn't say the right things, and suddenly even NVIDIA is back under pressure, sort of out of nowhere? Or is that only going to ratchet up uh, the hopium and rose-colored glasses, aka the pain trade amplifier, or is it going to probably again be a surprise and not really do much to the market? And sort of like this whole earnings season unofficially ends with a whimper, and then the market's left to sort of fend for itself on its own, and maybe it's at the whims of Trump's quite active social media feed at times. I don't know. And then again, just reiterating the sincere thanks. So on that, I'm going to pause. We're going to switch right over to the charts, and we're just going to get right into it because unfortunately, I've had no time to do anything, and that's just the way life is. And I won't have any time to do anything again this weekend, unfortunately. So it's just again, it's the way things are, and you just gotta do the best you can sometimes. So let's see where we are. Let's just go with screen two, and I think I'm just gonna pull things onto screen two. So let's see if we get the right share, and we are getting the right share. So hopefully no one will get too mad with me, but this is the problem without having the prep time. Um, Boy, it was frustrating. I checked this with Marianne, and she confirmed that I had not mentioned anything. And I meant to mention that I really liked this Ion Q. Um, and I did not last week. And so Ryan and I often discuss ideas for services, and Ryan liked Rigetti, which was a fine pick, and I liked this was, I think, maybe like Wednesday or Tuesday or Wednesday, and Ryan liked Rigetti, and you could see that it had a nice week right there. I liked Ion Q. I forgot to mention Ion Q last week. They both had really quite good weeks, so no complaints. I think maybe our Phoenix portfolio is the one where Ryan put Rigetti. I threw Ion Q out there, and I just regret that I did not mention it because I was in it, and I really like the charts, and it just went bonkers on news on Thursday. So it was I was waiting around. I thought it was acting pretty well above the 100. I'm not big on moving averages. I'm just using the what do you call it? The tools we've got in front of us here to convey this. But if you want to look at it this way, it was acting pretty well, holding above the 100 after the nice run that it had, and it's got these short-term SMAs trending up nicely, and then started lifting because of its performance. It started lifting some of these longer ones up. So everything from those perspectives was looking pretty good. But I think really what really mattered more to me, which often does, was this sort of cup and handly type look. Now, people are going to say, well, that's not really a cup and handle. And that's always your call, right? It's definitely an eye of the beholder thing. But I really looked at it and just said, this sort of saucer type thing happening, then the kind of like sideways action towards the end of it. And then we took off, and that was really on news. So they had it going pretty well there. I don't know. I didn't even get a chance to look at what was going on. I know that the CEO had some comments about he plans to be the leadership and in this quantum space, and he has a plan to do it. I don't know the real details on it, but so that's kind of frustrating that that did not get conveyed. That was one of the ones I wanted to mention last week. We did have QBTS. I can only work with UOA. Obviously, I can only work with the stocks that we see, right? So we had this quantum QBTS, the D wave quantum, I think it's called, or something like that. But this came in a couple weeks ago on the 15th. And naturally, right, with the way that quantum computing or whatever you want to call it took off, this was one that had a little bit of short data. And we went with an in the money call to hopefully get a roll together, only because the charts were flashing a little overbought at the moment. STOB, that's my shorthand for charts are a little overbought, but quite interesting on balance. So that was the first hit that I saw, and then now they're coming. They were that I didn't see anything in IonQ, unfortunately, but this is really what when I saw how good this chart looked in QBTS, that's what I decided I needed to look at some of the other ones for my just personal trading. Hoping that UOA would come in um, on them, and that uh, that didn't happen right away, unfortunately. Now today, as a reason I'm bringing it up, we've had a bunch of updates and all that stuff for more. I think there's been more QBTS UOA that followed up subsequent to that one, and we had some traders requesting higher and higher levels because they keep rolling, which is something that we are really proponents of, especially when the action stays good. And this spaghetti, I just put this in for next week. So I think there's really some potential still in this space. And even in IonQ, like I wouldn't say just because it had such a monster move that you give up on that. But this to me, with this sort of not really a cup and handle, but sort of cup and handle-esque, right? I know it doesn't really meet a strict definition. It just that big picture look on the monthlies, it just looks explosive, right? It's there now. I think the problem is the market. The problem to me is the market right now, where it wasn't just a little bit of a pullback, and this is IonQ, and we could go through other ones too. But I'm just saying these charts are very intriguing, and they were last week and a couple of weeks ago. I I don't know. I mean, the charts just continue to look good to me, and the stocks continue to go. And that's I don't know. I mean, I don't even know what to say about that, but that's what it is. And this Rigetti big picture looks really good too. So I didn't want to blow that again. And like I said, don't get mad. It wasn't obviously intentional. I wouldn't even bring it up. I could just skip mentioning it, but I did bring it up with Marianne in one of our webinars. She's like, no, I don't think you did. And I was like, damn, boy, it just so much on my mind with different things. I just can't remember it all. But yeah, so that's very interesting because if you look at, let's jump over to the Sox since we're kind of talking about, the Sox had a rough week. The Sox had a rough week. And so this is one thing I'm going to highlight after our bullet points having been out of the way now or gotten out of the way, is that we talked about these the possibilities here, right, where they left these air pockets. And I'm not a big fan of fighting the air pockets right? Like basically saying, oh, look at these gaps. We got to start shorting the hell out of this. I'm not a big fan of that, personally. And I think I learned that the hard way, literally like 3 decades ago. That's how long ago I gave up on wanting to get on the wrong side of big moves to the upside. That even if they don't make sense to you, you just say it doesn't matter because there's got to be something better than a stock that doesn't want to go down that you can short. That's basically where I ended up after being so dense to even do it a second time or a third time or a fourth time. I can't even remember how many dumb trades I did thinking it was short term, overbought it would back and fill a little bit and just didn't happen. Anyway, um, now, right, this matters a little bit more because you did leave gaps and now you may have became exhausted, right? So they did the old get it above, we talked about this way back when, get it above the 200, get it above the 150. Can you hold? No, it hasn't held. Now, it could be right back up again, right? That's the thing about with Trump, number one, and number two with NVDA. How can you say that there can't be news that develops that takes this thing right back up? And it very well could. So I think this Trump wild card is tough. I mean, it's just, that's why I hit on DDA so much and regularly, but especially like last week and the couple weeks before, because didn't want to get the false sense of security going, complacency, wanted everybody to realize that the news could reemerge at any time. And lo and behold, Trump, as I said, I don't even know, not like it's a genius statement or I'm the only one saying it, but Trump just is a disruptive force, and for good or for bad, for better or for worse, whatever you want to call it, maybe both. But he doesn't care about that. To me, like he almost seems to thrive on it. So maybe I'm wrong about that, but uh, so with that kind of situation in the White House, you've got to adjust. It's not this sort of let the market alone, and don't interfere type of administration. It's clearly hands-on, again, for better or for worse administration, whatever your viewpoints are. So I think you have to really be disciplined and not let when you get really good moves, you just can't let those things evaporate and reverse on you. So that's what I would, and there's news trading opportunities. For example, this I couldn't even keep up with everything because we had so many responsibilities. But this Oklo had some UOA. It was already up on news. The UOA hit, and then it proceeded to pop even further. So it traded up to 52.17. I can't remember where it hit. I remember getting the idea in as quickly as I could. Hopefully, some players got involved quickly and made some profits on that one today. But there were other related hits too. Well, I'll show that one right now that I think we did have. We did have URA. There's another QBTS hit late, as a matter of fact. And then here's this URA. And there's Rigetti, right? So these went into, I think, our UOA Essential. At least this one went in for UOA Essential to try to get some of these names because there was UOA. Number one, it's near term UOA. Okay, so that's interesting, right? It's a cheap shot. I mean, look what they're buying. That to me is right. It's almost like throwing money away, right? You would think you've got 4 trading days next week after the Memorial Day weekend holiday, and you've got a 7-cent call. But these things do erupt, and there could be news, and someone could be in there, and they came back for even more of these. Look where they're buying there. That's further out. But this made it in because I would normally say low probability. I mean, anyone that knows anything about options would. But we have a news-making administration that's prioritizing technology and trying to become right leaders in it again, or whatever the case may be in terms of hardware or whatever. So I don't know what could come of that. I just know that it could jazz things up. I just think the problem is the problem to me is the market right now. But there were a lot of names that really I'll try to show some of these names that I was able to work with today. And it was just a very tough day because we had to get various newsletters out, so folks are ready to go on Tuesday morning. I think Ryan has to do some traveling as well for his daughters. There's a typo there I have to fix, but there was a lot of activity that came in here that I normally on a Friday that could I like to wind things down if the market's not really clear cut, and the market really wasn't clear cut. I'd kind of rather start fresh unless the ideas are compelling. But I thought these ideas were pretty darn compelling. You know, the Oklo, there you go. That did pop, almost got to our second level. The NXE with the late sell off, some of this stuff I don't know what it did, but let's see what FLR. I know that one came in. Wow, so that one had a good day. What about the NXE? Let's see what happened there. No, I didn't even, these things really are, yeah, they really had strong finishes. So I don't even know where we were on some of those things. That looks like it might have popped up. Fluor definitely popped up. What about the fuel cell and FRO? I don't know what they did. But yeah, I'm just trying to make the point that it looks like people are positioned. That actually finished nicely. And how about this fuel cell? And that finished nicely. So yeah, a lot of this paper came in and these charts looked good. The market was holding itself together, but that's my concern going out, with Trump. There could definitely be news that gets made over the weekend. And let's just take care of my first big points first, because I'm going to jump over to that. And my first point is, and I'm not going to go into specifics on this, but you can look across the board here at every single one of these sectors. There's the 12 S&P sectors up here, and virtually every single one of them had a rough week, right? So when they're selling everything, that should tell you right there. I mean, that's basically a risk off situation, right? Even those that resisted selling off before, and there were several, but the leaders were definitely XLK, XLC, and they ended up at the end of the week having a rough week. But that's the thing. Some stocks, obviously, as I just showed, that's one reason I wanted to show that some stocks just resisted all that as if it didn't matter. It's almost like they're trading independently of the market, and most stocks do not do that, especially when the whole market's going risk off. There's a reason for that, and that can be interesting if the market holds itself together. It can be interesting. So those stocks could really be something some of those that I flashed up there. Another one that could be something that really seemed to hang tough this week was Roblox. Now, this is an overbought name without question. I think the daily RSI is up near 80 almost. So this is not a layup. But this stock did not want to go down this week. They held it together. I think if they manage to get the Rallinator 2000 going again to start the week, maybe there's good news that Trump puts out with his social media. They could start to take even overbought stocks and go with it. Because remember what I said with quantum, with QBTS, I should just say deep wave quantum. When I put this in on the 15th, where was that? Right there. Right there on the 15th. Right on the 15th, it had a 71 RSI, and that's after having really cooled off for an entire week, where it wasn't able to move the close higher needle, if you will, right? So it did pop a little bit here and there, but it wasn't able to hold those gains. So it was still at a 71 reading, really, right, after chilling for a week. So I'm not normally looking at that kind of a scenario for my ideal setup. I'd rather have something that cooled off a little bit more than that, yet held on to gains and found support exactly where you'd want it to, whatever the various forms of support would be. It doesn't really matter, but in the grand scheme. But yeah, I want to see that. But look, it didn't even matter, right? They just came after the stuff. So that's what I'm looking at with something like a Roblox. That's also a name I think we have this week, and I think I may have gotten that one in before the bell. I can't even remember in terms of a UOA idea, because we did have Roblox UOA a few days ago as well. So there you go on that. Just Yeah, I'll try to flash that real quick just so you see what I mean. I think I got Roblox. I did get Roblox in. Yeah, so the Roblox UOA traded on Wednesday, and I wanted to get it in, and I kept, but I think what happened was that my alert got tripped, and then late on Wednesday afternoon, the market really started to fall apart, so I just held off on it. And so I think I set another alert and it went back up and through. And I said, this thing really does not want to go down. So if they go ahead and they start to get this Rallinator 2000 cranked up again, just be ready for that. But one part of the risk off picture I already showed. The other part of the risk off picture is our basic um, market breadth screen that we pull over here. And now that you can see that, I just want to show everyone that this is not, right, this is really not a great week for market breadth. Now, we did say last week it doesn't get much better, right? So we were kind of expecting that this should happen. Not, you know me, I'm talking about probabilities, what normally happens, except for instances where I think there's a little wrinkle that it's not likely to. But what I was getting at was that probably it doesn't get much better. Most times, right? Most cases, you probably have a rough little pullback type of thing. And the way things were acting, as I said, I thought that would maybe be for the first part of the week into midweek, and they'd get their act together. And that did seem like it was happening, even right halfway through Wednesday. They were not far removed from the highs. In fact, I think on Wednesday, I want to say on Wednesday, the Qs actually made a high that day, or which, yeah, they actually did make the high for the week, I think on that day, on Wednesday. 523 versus 522.53. So yeah, so things were doing quite well until I think that bond auction hit the tape, and I think from there it became rougher sailing. But now that we've covered the fact that this is basically risk off, you know what? I'll do this. We'll get to a better chart. But then XAU, just while we're here, XAU just powered. Again, more of a defensive, obviously defensive name. So that is that. And you've got that risk off going defensive. You can't really say much about that. And so a lot of people are really going to like what they see here. And we just added a couple of ideas as a matter of fact, because what I have to do is the way I look at what I try to do for UOA Pro is to not flood it with every idea that's out there at the same time, right? Try to, if I can, I don't want people to have to comb through 30 or 40 ideas per day. I try to do it in a way that if it's something I think needs to happen right away, I get it in there. And if it's something that can wait and it's more about let's see how this market develops, I try to do it that way. This way, it comes across as a timely idea. Sometimes there's just too many responsibilities and I can't do that. But some people are just going to recognize this pattern and just clearly like what they see. So it didn't take long for me to put GDX in. And I think I even got involved in some GDXJ. I have some of that again. But anyway, that's something that I thought was worth mentioning, that this is starting to act well. So that kind of puts you in that position where you're looking at it saying, okay, if I think it's pretty clear that things got defensive. Now, just because it doesn't get much better, market breadth measures backed off the way we really thought they should, doesn't mean it's over. Okay, it's just that putting it all together like we try to do each week in a really clumsy kind of uh, method or approach that lacks eloquence and elegance. This is where we're at, because I wish I did have the time to do more of this, but this is where our first, in my mind, that's the first crack of a support level. This is going to be depends on where you want to draw it. I would put one maybe there. If you want to just keep cracking, right, these different forms of support, if you believe in support lines, and especially if you believe in the way I draw them, which I believe in. But here you are now at the 200 in purple. You've got the 100 there in the dash white right below the 200. You've got the rising 20, right? So you came back and we said this, that you could end up testing these key SMAs now from the upside, and essentially from above. And that's what you did, and they held, right? So this is where it's like, okay, this is why I'm saying that we could be in flux and you have to be ready to go with whatever starts coming our way, because you could even rally, come back up to here. I think if you struggle at this, if you struggle at that now resistance line that we cracked right there, not a good sign, right? That you can't get through there. That would be almost like saying you can't get through the 10, okay, at that point. If you fall back under this longer term support line, right, you can't really hold above that one. That wouldn't be good, right? And certainly if you're going to have the 20 rise up a little bit more, right? When something back here drops off, this will be higher than where we are now. So, right, you're gonna start to see this continue to elevate unless we fall apart in a historic fashion. So you're going to be up here bunched around in this whole area near that 575, which is a number we talked about right near the 573, 575 many times. And here's the gap. So this is the gap fill would be 567.50 technically, which I wouldn't wait around for, by the way. I would always cheat that up a little bit if you're bidding for that. But the whole point of this is, right, you could be right back above trend, I think, very easily if you get back above the blue line, certainly above the 150 there in rust, that SMA, which is near 580, and then above the high, of course, would be even better, right? That you actually start powering through Friday's range and you start working your way back up. You're still not out of the woods though, because you have to worry about lower highs. You have to worry about other forms of resistance getting in the way. But this just became, right, because of this sort of defensive lurch that the market took this week. This just became a little bit more challenging at the very least, if you ask me. So your short-term trend is down now, right? This little 5-day trend is down, but you didn't close at a worst case scenario. That's good. Your intermediate term's up, your long term is still up, but you're flirting with it. And as I said before, right, you aren't back above here yet. So you don't know if you're able to get back above hold and sort of prove that you really are launching a whole new leg higher after a fairly significant corrective phase, albeit maybe a short one, but still significant in terms of the percentage pullback that we experienced. So there's a lot of if thens in these charts right now. I think in some strange way, some things still look risk on as if they don't care what's going on, despite what happened with yields with the bond market this week, with all the other data that's kind of shown up. That's a little stagflationary for some folks' taste, but that's sort of again largely ignored. I would say they will ignore that. It sort of shows, I think, that a lot of people are probably arguing, and maybe correctly, that the Fed is maybe behind the action. We'll see about that. Trump is single-handedly trying to make deal after deal after deal where he can, I guess, to really buoy things, or at least it seems that way. Whether or not they pay off in the short run or long term, that the jury's out. Hopefully they do for the country, but it just matters that it hits the tape, because when they need something to rally, it doesn't matter if the payoff is literally going to be years and years and years away in a material sense. It only matters that it happened now and they can create a squeeze from it. But this is what I'm getting at, right? You could really be quickly back in trouble if you fall below the 20-day and you're on your way back down to here. Then you start testing other things like the 50 SMA right there that's rising. And that's really not a good look, that you couldn't hold on to your longer term SMAs and you put in a lower high, right? And so the whole picture starts to sort of quickly flip, where on balance, it doesn't really look that good. And I don't think you made it. The thing about it is I don't think you made it all the way there where you're back to where, hey, everything's wonderful. And let's not forget that the month is about to end. We have one more week. So I think it would be really a lot better if we did somehow end on a very positive note to this month. I think that would maybe help encourage people that the charts really did finish the month strongly. as opposed to weekly. So I think there's a lot here. I think it's a real inflection point in terms of the time of everything. And I really see how very quickly, right, you could easily become back above trend. Things are going to look good. It looks like you're going to close out the month strongly. You've got a higher low in place. You held on to key support where you should. All these types of things. So I'm not trying to be right evasive or not pick a side. That just a lot of you know that's not my style anyway. I'm just trying to lay out some of the thoughts that occur to me objectively when I look at this. And I think you have to say you could really be if you're. I think if you're objective, you have to admit we could really be in a state of flux, especially because I was a little caught off guard with how defensive the market ended up looking at the end of the week. I really thought that it was kind of correcting and yeah, things were pulling back and it was kind of across the board, but it actually caught me by surprise a little bit. We talked about it on Cocktail Hour that it was a little bit worse than I thought it was. And I don't want to hit the panic button on that. I think it's too soon. But with the VIX kind of in front of a long holiday weekend, the way that we have it right now, the VIX is up at 22, 29. You don't really see the VIX hang on. Now, granted, you could say, well, it backed off big time from the mid 20s, and it did. But that's still a pretty high close in front of a 3-day weekend. So people wanted to hold on to their options at higher, significantly higher than usual premiums in front of 3 days of theta. So I don't know what you want to make out of that, but it's sort of like you gotta respect that a little bit, I think. So there's your spiders. Look, we talked about some of those levels. You just you got to go with that Bruce Lee quote, right? Be water, my friend, on this one because you've got to flow with this. This could with in the absence of news, I could see them whipping things around and getting people to react. I still think, just to reiterate, I think there's a ton of people that are lagging behind this market and that really bailed out on it um, and now they need to catch up. At the same time, I've seen that hedge funds have gone bonkers short all over again. And you know what that usually implies? That usually implies that they're early and they get annihilated before they capitulate, then the market finally does fall. But right, with us bringing the NVDA EPS to the forefront this week, that is going to be the main story in terms of EPS season. And then that's it. Then you go back into where you're a couple of months away from the July stuff. So the market might have to stand on its own, and maybe people start realizing that earnings per share in the S&P have been brought down significantly. And here we are, earlier this week, we were just a few percentage point from the all-time high, something we've talked about for it seems like at least a month to me. So just some thoughts to throw out there. Here's your cues. I think there's been a lot of people that have also really plowed into these markets as well. I know that the public is apparently really plowed into these markets, and I think a lot of people have really plowed into NVIDIA. So thinking it was the buy of a lifetime. So my take on these things is that you're gonna love this one. It depends, but but that's the truth. I've seen where when I start to see certain factors that are in some of these charts, and I do see them right now, that usually has meant, not always, but usually has meant over the course of my career that there will be large reactions. There will be large reactions to the NVIDIA EPS. And so that means that one side is going to be really happy and one side is likely to be really sad. Now, obviously, it doesn't happen every time. I've just seen this propensity for very strong movement when the boat is really one-sided. That's just the simplest way to put it. And so to me, there's been a big bet that everything's going to be wonderful again. And if that turns out to not be the case, that could be a real problem. And if it does turn out to be the case, it could be a real problem for people that are non-believers because they're maybe still way under invested right now relative to where they need to be. So just keep that in mind because I do think I don't want to have a nothing burger happen after saying that, but it does that also does happen. I had to include that. So, but I'm just saying in more cases than not, I'd say significantly more cases than not, I expect there to be a bigger reaction to those earnings and to and by the market at large. So we'll see what that is. Again, could be a nothing burger, but in most cases when I've seen stuff like this, it turns out to be something. So we'll see. There's always exceptions, almost always exceptions. Anyway, this is the cues. You can see they found support right on the rising 15 in red. You've got the big ones, the 150 in rust, the 100, the 200 right below. There's a rising 20 right below there, right? So this did stop where it should for now, right? That was the first SMA below the 10. It did. It's got these to catch it, something I talked about last week, right? So if there is more selling, this should really be fine, right? It should get caught unless there's news, and of course, material news, significant news, large news, right? Gravitational news, impactful news, whatever. But that's exactly the type of administration we have in the White House. I mean, I think it was real late in the day, and I'm like, what just happened now? And because I think U.S. Steel, there was breaking news from Trump on U.S. Steel about how it's going to remain in American control, I think. I could have sworn I saw something like that. Trump approves U.S. Oh, he says reportedly approves acquisition. Um, it says oh the HQ, yeah, HQs remain in Pittsburgh. So there's the there's even just more news being made. It's it's quite remarkable that how much how involved this is. Not something you see all the time, at least in front of the curtain rather than behind the curtain. But anyway, there's the cues. So we know where we think that there will be support coming in. You got to probably favor the 496 area down to 490, not 494, because your 100 and 200 are right there. They're the most widely followed. As far as the upside, I think you've got to be concerned about getting back above this 10-day, right? That's at 516, right? So it's only 1% away, but you really want to see that work back above there. It's the first thing you can really look at, and then you're going to be looking at this closing high as a good ballpark, the 522, because you really couldn't get further than that on a closing basis. So it looks like 516 and 522 are your next ones up, and yep. And then on downside, I think you just take all these SMAs right here and you work with them, and I think you do have a big gap there. If you did get down to here, a little overshoot, of the 200 gets you close to another gap fill. So again, that's probably going to take some sort of an international development or Trump type news, Trump, let's say, generated news or whatever you want to call it, but never a dull moment. Here's another sign of risk off we were talking a couple weeks ago how this was starting to potentially look good. Don't want to get ahead of ourselves type of thing, but boy, wouldn't it be something if these smaller companies really started. Now you can't say it's over. This could be a higher low on the way right up. So we don't want to rule that out. But at the same time, not a great week for small caps. Did close better, right, strongly versus where they opened. Did kind of survive, even dropping all the way to the 50, which was the last SMA, by the way. So all in all, not the end of the world, but that's just not a great look at the moment. The good news, I think, is that visually, this low is definitely lower than the one we may have in place now. And so you do have a series of rising lows that are still in place. You will have sort of more of an extended corrective phase that gets maybe traced out here if we start to reverse, and that would be a good welcome sign. And if you have these kinds of gains from 172-ish all the way up to say 210, and then you only back off to about 200, that's a pretty good win in terms of how much retracement. So you held on most of the gains, you're right back at it. You certainly, if this does start to go, you certainly won't be overbought anytime soon. And so maybe what that does, maybe, is it lets it start to work up towards the 100 and towards these highs and fight its way through. But that's going to really be, we may as well just round that off and call it 209, 209, 210. That's the next really the big upside level that this has to get through. And that's 2% away. Then you could start thinking about more, but probably, right, you'll have some macro news that will be telling you that there might be some developments or good things or what have you, if we're on that road. Now, on the downside, 50 days very clear. You all know that super widely followed. It's only down a few percent, 197.52. So not even, I guess, not even a full 2%. Has a gap back here. Where else would you look for? I think the hesitation basically in here is going to be your next level at 194. So I would say you're 197.52, then you're 194. Then it becomes a problem. If we start cracking below there, that's really problematic. You could really start to see a real problem develop where you're on your way back down towards these lows. And the reason for that would be that you've got lower highs right out. You have this sort of consolidation we were in, and then that breaks down ugly. You have a really ugly leg lower. You have this bounce. The bounce can't take out these highs as much as they wanted to make it look like it failed for this at this point. Again, slightly exceeding is what they do. And this is the game that they play technically when they paint these prices on these charts. And so you'd have this sort of lower high versus here, and then you'd have this lower low, and now you'd be working back down towards the low. So the best scenario is higher low probably, but then you also have double bottom, all that kind of stuff that could start to flare up. But yeah, those are your levels there. I would say this is not out of the woods. There's some good things that are hanging on there, but boy, it still doesn't look good enough. So I think probably needs news to really change the course right now. And I don't know what that would be, since it seems like the Fed doesn't want to budge, and small business probably is not liking rates where they are, especially when you may have sort of a lukewarm at best economy, except for what the big boys are doing. Anyway, diamonds, right? These international things, they definitely impact. Similar situation in that you get this lower high here. It's not over yet, right? You still have higher low here, and you're right above the 50, much like the IWM. They're trading similarly. So I would say this has got its work cut out for it to get back up through these SMAs. The 100, 210 are all right about there. That's at 422, so that's 1.5% above the close. The 50 is the big deal here. Probably really that fib actually sticks out to me at 408. So that's not too far below the 50 because the 50 is at 410.42. Where else can we look at that would matter? I'm trying to see where we get on flats. And there is some action back in there. Yeah, so that 408 is pretty. We've been using that 408, 409 for the longest time, but it just keeps showing up it just keeps showing up a lot whenever we're near it. It just matters. I don't know why, but it does. So what else is there that we can really focus on? You're probably looking at 402 after that. I'd say 402, which happens to kind of works out with one of these fibs we've got up here as well. So I think it's going to be 408 then 402 if you're just looking for levels. But this could very easily change. I just want to reiterate that look, they take this thing down to where it is here, and they start pulling it back up again. You might have that higher low in, and you just don't want to rule that out. You just don't. You just don't know what the problem is. You just don't know what news is lurking. All this chaos, seeming chaos, maybe because there's something else at work. I don't know. I'm just saying that often there is, and if you want to know something, right? Do some people know, and is there something going on that most of us are not privy to? I think the answer would be yes, right? So note that this traded all the way up to 54 when this U.S. steel news hit the tape. And so let's see if I can come over here. Let's see if I can go here. And I think there may have been some activity in here that was passed along to me by maybe one of the luckiest guys that's around these days. So let's see if we can find that. Let's see, 30 might help us. And I believe that, let's see, there was someone that came in, and I think they bought, it was about an hour and 15 minutes to go, and I believe they bought these. I want to say they bought these calls that were expiring today. And I want to say they paid about 19 cents for it because I had an elf tell me that. So if you're wondering, is that true? Is that possible? And then that news hit the tape. But let's see if we can let's see if we can sort that out here. If I can get this to work. Product depth. I don't want that. I want to be able to use where's oh, there it is. I was looking for the little filter. So let's do this one, and let's do the strikes of 49. And let's see if there was anyone that bought those as we think that they did. Did anyone buy a 500 lot, or maybe anyone buy 500 of those calls? And I want to say they told me, I was told it was around 2:45 p.m. on the East Coast time. So that's 15s, right? So I need to get back further. So they did trade a lot. That's 145. Where am I? Oh, there I am. Yeah, there they are. So it looks like they may have bought 550 of them, actually, for 19 cents. Right. So at one point, when the stock traded 54, just intrinsic value, they were, which is all that's left anyway, but those were worth $5. Now I have no idea if they sold them. I don't even want to spend the time on it, but so, right, this is it. Like this happens all the time. We talk about it all the time. I just thought I'd show that. Someone pointed that out. One of my colleagues pointed that out, and that's of course very interesting. And you would think it's very wrong, but might have been the luckiest timing of a zero DTE out of the money call that anybody bought today. But it worked, and who knows what's going on there? But like I said, it's quite often the case that someone knows more than we do. So that's why I'm going to go back and just say, yes, the market took a lurch towards risk off, and it's concerning. We should be respectful of that, but we have to just go with the flow, and the flow could flip very easily this week. So the most likely scenario, where are we now? What type of market are we in? We're in a tough one coming up this week because things can flip back and forth very easily, but you just have to not lose sight of the fact, in my opinion, that there's always someone that knows more. Just assume that. And that's why you should just go with what the tape is telling you, or what the price action is telling you, however you care to read it, because what you know may work against you because you don't know what they know. And if you're just assuming that's all there is to know, and it isn't, it could be hurting you, right? So again, go with the price action as best you can, and then just keep sticking and moving with it. That's all you can do is adapt, because they're always ahead of us. We don't have the insights that they do. Okay, so on that note, I'm going to wrap things up. It was a kind of a different type of experience today, but hopefully some of the stuff helps you out this upcoming week or some week in the future. But yeah, I really wanted to just say that defensive week. We'll see what comes of it. Be ready to flip around on a moment's notice, just the way it is right now, especially with the news bombs that hit this tape. And you keep doing that. You do that with discipline. You grind out money during phases like that, and then we'll get back. There will be times where we sell off strongly, or we get this really powerful trending action like we enjoyed on the bounce. We'll get back to that at some point, and then that's when we'll do much better. But if you don't lose and make a little bit while the market's tough, you're way ahead of the game. So on that note, I want to wish everyone a great and safe weekend, and I hope you really enjoy the holiday break. I want to thank all those that sacrificed. Sincere thank you for on this Memorial Day holiday weekend. So everyone take care. Thanks again for tuning in.